Hey, before we begin, take a second. If this is your first time here, welcome. And if stories about real emotions, broken trust, quiet heartbreak, and the kind of truth that changes lives speak to you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It may seem small, but it truly makes a difference. Your support keeps this channel alive. It allows us to share stories that don't just entertain, but connect. Stories that sit with you long after the screen goes dark. Stories that remind us how fragile love really is, and how heavy the truth becomes when we finally stop running from it. Because life doesn't always fall apart loudly. Sometimes it breaks quietly. No shouting. No chaos. No dramatic moment that warns you it's coming. Sometimes, it's just a sound that doesn't belong. A pause that lasts too long. A silence that feels heavier than words ever could. That's how my life changed. Not in a single explosive moment, but in a whisper I almost ignored. From the outside, our home looked perfect. The kind of house people admire while driving past slowly. Fresh paint on the walls. A neatly trimmed lawn. White curtains that always looked clean and untouched by time. Neighbors smiled at us like we were proof that love still worked. You two are perfect together, they'd say. And I'd smile back. Ide not. I'd pretend I believed it. But perfection is dangerous. Because perfection often hides decay. Behind those spotless walls, silence had moved in. It didn't arrive suddenly, it settled slowly. Like dust collecting in corners you don't check anymore. A heavy, suffocating silence. The kind that presses against your chest until even your own breathing feels too loud. We celebrated birthdays with polite smiles. Marked anniversaries with routine dinners. Sat across from each other at the table, pretending not to notice the growing distance. Two people sharing space, but no longer sharing connection. Once, my husband looked at me like I was the center of his world. Like my presence alone made everything else fade. Now, his eyes didn't meet mine anymore. They passed through me, as if I were just another piece of furniture in a house he lived in out of habit. We slept in the same bed, ate under the same roof, followed the same routines. But our souls hadn't touched in years. If you've ever lived inside that kind of silence, the kind louder than arguments, heavier than anger, then you already understand. And if that feeling feels familiar to you, subscribe. Because this story isn't just mine. It's for anyone who has ever loved quietly and realized too late that silence can be the cruelest sound of all. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning. Nothing special. Nothing dramatic. Sunlight drifted lazily through the curtains. Coffee steamed gently in the mug beside me. The city hummed outside, distant and familiar. I was barely awake when I heard it. A soft, rhythmic sound, coming from upstairs. At first I ignored it. Old pipes. The wind. My imagination. That's what logic said. But something inside my chest froze. My spoon trembled in the mug. My heartbeat stumbled. Because some sounds don't belong. Not there. Not then. Logic whispered, ignore it. But my heart moved faster than reason ever could. Before I realized what I was doing, I was climbing the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. The silence grew sharper, almost painful. At the top, I saw the door. A thin crack of light spilled into the hallway. My hand hovered over the doorknob. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back. But I didn't. I had to know. The door creaked open. And there it was. The glow of a screen painting his face in cold, unnatural light. My husband. The man who once promised he would never hurt me. Typing words that were never meant for my eyes. Words meant for someone else. You make me feel alive again. Alive. That single word cut deeper than anything else. Because he hadn't said that to me in years. Maybe never. Not like that. He looked up. Our eyes met. And everything shattered in that moment. The memories. The promises. The quiet hope I'd been holding on to. That maybe we could fix this. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Sometimes silence screams louder than words ever could. That night, we sat at the dinner table like strangers rehearsing a scene neither of us believed anymore. The plates were warm. The food smelled familiar. The room looked exactly the same. But nothing felt real. Fork against plate. The faint clink echoed louder than it should have. Every small sound felt amplified. as if the house itself was listening, waiting for someone to speak. Our eyes avoided each other with practiced precision. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers, to throw the truth across the table and force him to catch it. But anger didn't come. Instead, there was emptiness. A hollow space where love used to live. The man sitting across from me was still my husband by name, by law, by routine. But he wasn't mine anymore. And deep down I knew it. Our love hadn't died that night. It hadn't even died recently. It had been fading for years. Quietly, patiently, methodically. And I had ignored every warning sign because silence felt safer than truth. Days blurred into one another. Heavy, colorless, exhausting. I moved through the house like a ghost, touching things that no longer felt like mine, sitting in rooms filled with memories that now felt borrowed. Every sound became a reminder. His footsteps, his phone vibrating, the way his attention drifted elsewhere. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at his screen, a faint smile tugging at his lips, and my chest would tighten, because I knew that smile wasn't meant for me. At night, I woke up at 2 a.m. The other side of the bed was cold. Too cold. I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering if this was real, or if I'd finally slipped into some cruel dream I couldn't wake up from. Two people living under the same roof, sharing space, sharing history, pretending to still be in love that I told myself I needed to be strong. But strength isn't what people think it is. It doesn't roar. It doesn't announce itself. Real strength whispers. It tells you to endure quietly, to survive loneliness without complaint, to sit beside pain while pretending you're fine. Strength looks like staying silent while your heart breaks in slow motion. If you've ever loved someone who forgot how to see you, you'll understand why I didn't speak. For months, I drowned in the space between us. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. Then Friday came. Same house. Same silence. But I was different. I didn't freeze this time. I didn't pretend not to notice. I climbed the stairs like someone chasing truth, not avoidance. Each step felt deliberate, intentional. At the top, the door was open. That same cold glow spilled into the hallway. There he was. Same posture. Same screen. Same guilt flickering across his face when he realized I was there. But this time, I didn't turn away. My voice trembled, but it didn't break. Why? I asked. He looked confused, almost defensive. Why what? He said. Why am I not enough? The words hung in the air, heavy and fragile. He stammered. It doesn't mean anything, he said quickly. It's just talking. I shook my head. It means everything, I whispered. Because it wasn't about messages, or screens, or words. It was about choice. You chose silence over me. And in that moment, something inside me finally shattered. Not from pain, but from clarity. Our love hadn't ended suddenly. There was no single mistake. No dramatic betrayal that destroyed everything at once. It had been dying quietly. In missed conversations. In avoided eye contact. In emotional distance disguised as routine. And I had been afraid to hear its final breath. Afraid to admit that holding on was hurting me more than letting go ever could. I looked at him then, not as my husband, not as my partner, but as someone who had already left. And I realized something terrifying and freeing all at once. I was alone. That night I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't ask him to choose me. Because I finally understood something important. Love that has to be begged for is already gone. I lay awake, staring into the dark, listening to the sound of my own breathing. And for the first time in years, I listened to myself. Not the fear. Not the memories. Not the version of love I wish still existed. But the quiet voice inside me saying, this isn't home anymore. Even while standing right in front of him. The next morning, the sun rose like it always did. Soft. Indifferent. But everything felt different. I packed a small bag. No yelling. No dramatic goodbye. No speeches. Just quiet movements filled with meaning. Each folded shirt was a decision. Each step toward the door was an act of courage. When I reached the doorway, I paused. Not because I doubted myself, but because I was saying goodbye to a version of me that had waited too long. I closed the door behind me, and the silence that once suffocated me finally felt like air.